Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Power Rankings of the PBAL Season 6 post-Week 3, because that made sense to me, and that's when I wanted to do it. So, my name is GoldoaDragon. I am the coach of the New York Empoleon. I am participating in this season, and what the hell did I do? All right, I decided, really randomly and arbitrarily, that I wanted to see if I could create a list of power rankings that were not just randomly assigned, but instead objectively scored. But I don't think objective numbers are the only way to determine power rankings. I do think there is an element of who the coach is, how much, kind of, what's the word? Chutzpah they have to perform. How dangerous do other coaches view them as? So I couldn't just use an objective score. I also wanted to factor in a subjective score. So your score, or a coach's score in this, is determined by two things, which is broken down into a grand total of 5 categories. The two main categories are the objective score and the subjective score. Your objective score is going to be 75%, and your subjective score is going to be 25% of your total. It's going to be a score out of 20 total possible points, and you get a total of 5, like max 5 from the subjective, and a total of 15 possible from the objective. If you do not want any more breakdown, if that is enough information for you, there is a timestamp in the description below to go just skip straight to number 16. For those of you who want a bit more information than that, I will describe exactly what I did to come up with these scorings so that you can make the best assessment of whether or not you think they were fair, and to actually understand what these numbers mean. Because in the actual rankings, I will discuss them briefly, but I will not actually be going super in-depth for each coach what each of the 5 numbers were, unless it is relevant to their particular score. So, the 3 categories of objective scoring that I decided to use were differential, win percentage, and your strength of schedule, which was determined as a metric of opponent win percentage. Each of those 3 categories gets broken down and scaled to a maximum possible points, and then totaled to give you your objective score. Differential, I only wanted to use positive numbers, and since differential goes negative, I just took the lowest score and added it to everyone's score for differential. So the lowest, which was minus 13, became 0. The highest, which was 10, became 23. Everyone else's just gets an added 13 points. Then, the way that you scale a score is that you take the highest score that is known, or the highest score in the set, and you divide the score by that, and then you multiply it by whatever number you want to reach. In this case, I wanted scaled differential to be worth 1/6 of your overall points for your objective score. Since it's worth 15 total points as a category, this is worth 1/6 of that, or 2.5. So what you do is you take the differential that someone has, divide it by the biggest differential there is, and multiply it by 2.5. So for instance, the Roman Empoleons had a differential of 1. I added 13 to that, so they have a 14. Then you divide that by the highest, which was 23, as I mentioned before. You multiply it by 2.5, and their scaled differential gives them a 1.52. And that's how many points they earn for differential. That is the mathematics for how I will do all of these. I'm not going to describe that on every single one, but that's how that breaks down. That's how that works. For one more example, just so that everyone is sort of aware of how this works, the Orlando Magikarps have a differential of 7. Add 13, that's 20. And then to multiply that, divide that by 23, and then multiply it by 2.5, and you get a score of 2.17, and that's what they get for their differential. As you can see, that is higher than the Roman Empoleons by a noticeable margin, about half a point, but not an ungodly amount, because the max you could possibly get is only 2.5 points. All right, your record was done basically the same way, but in a more simpler fashion. It was done basically take your record, divide by 3, because that's the most possible wins that you could have, and there are teams with 3 wins, and then multiply by 5 points. This is worth 1/3 of your total 15-point objective score. For an example of this, we'll use, say, the Charlotte Corviknights. They have 2 wins. Divide that by 3, multiply by 5, and that's 3.33 points. Because there's only so many possible wins, because they are integers, and they only go up to 3, you will either score 5 points, 3.33 points, 1.67 points, or 0, depending on how many wins you have. Next up, and probably most complicatedly, is the strength of schedule. Again, I said I determined that by taking your opponent's win percentage. So I went through and I logged every single team's opponents and how many wins out of 9 games their opponents have. That was given a percentage. The highest percentage there was a 77.78 opponent win percentage, which is kind of ridiculous. So that basically means your opponents have won 7 out of 9 games. And then you divide that by the total maximum possible, in this case 77.7%, and multiply it by 7.5. 7.5 being half of your objective score is based solely on the strength of schedule. The reason for that is because this is how hard was it to get the record you got. Did you get to 3-0 by playing only teams who have never won a game? Or are you 0-3 facing 3 teams that are 3-0? Because if you are, the only thing we know is you're worse than the top 3 teams in the league. We don't know if you're worse than 5th. So this was given the highest weighting of all of my objective score. And so again, for one quick example, we'll take the Green Bay Yompers. The Green Bay Yompers have a strength of schedule of 4/9 or 44%. You divide that by 77%, and then you multiply it by 7.5, and so they will get 4.29 points. Again, as a result of this only being differentiated by ninths, you will either basically have 11.11, a 22.22, a 33.33, a 44.44, etc. percentage. That's the only one you can have. So there will be sort of gaps in between. It's not a perfect metric, but it was the best one that I could make on short notice. And then you add those 3 together, your differential, your record, and your strength of schedule, and that gives you your objective point total out of a total of possibly 15. Then I went in and I looked at your subjective scores. Your subjective scores were given 2 numerical ratings. Neither one I had a hand in. The original one was the post-draft score you were given by Skyrander. This was given a 25% weighting out of the 5 possible total points that this was worth. Like I said, this is worth 25% of your overall score. So since the objective is worth 15, this is worth 5. This category of subjective scoring. And then within that, the post-draft score is only 25% of that score. Things have changed. Teams have changed. There's been tons of transactions. People have gotten accustomed to their teams. So the post-draft score is given a very low weighting. It's worth only a maximum possible points of 1.25 out of the total 20 that you could get. Then, after week 3 had concluded, I had the commissioner of the league, Aaron, coach of the Roman Polions, send me a list of scores, never before revealed, of each coach and how he thinks they're doing based on their team composition, based on how they're doing, however he wanted to rate it. I didn't ask for the intricacies of his rating scale. And that was given a 3/4 weighting in the 5 points. So a total of 3.75 points for the scale for the highest team ranked. And then down from there. You add those 2 together, that gives you your subjective rating. That's out of 5 possible points. You add that to your objective rating out of 15 possible points, and you get your total score. And that's all there is to it. I know that was a super detailed explanation, but I wanted to go slow and make sure people understood what I was doing, because this is a really interesting way to actually make a comparable entity out of non-quantifiable things. So what you can do with these scores now is you can compare your score to somebody else's and get a sense of the probability that you're going to win the match. And on some level, a little bit of the probability of how much you'll win by, although that's a little bit harder of a metric to actually quantify in this way. So the way that this would work is if a team has a rating of 14 and another team has a rating of 9, what you would do is you'd add the 2 together. 14 plus 9, or a total of 23. And then you divide your number, let's say you're the team with the 14, by the total number, in this case 23, and that would be your winning percentage in the match. How likely you are to win the match. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do here, is give you a ranking based that you can use to actually learn something about your own play. That doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win. No team scored a 0, which means every team has a shot at winning every match. And the further apart you are, the more likely you are to win, but it's never 100%. All right, let's jump in with number 16. A total score of 8.4 out of 20 points. The Solihull Samurots. Solihull. I really apologize for not knowing how to say that. The Solihull Samurots, coached by Cyan Salamander, sitting at 0-3, not scoring a lot of points objectively. In fact, dead last in our objective scoring at 16th place. However, doing actually fairly decently in the subjective scoring, all the way up in 12th overall in our subjective scoring rating. But Aaron was harsh to the Solihull Samurots, giving them last place in his ranking. And despite 8th in the last power rankings, this team had the hardest fall of anybody. Sitting at 0-3 is not going to help you. Minus 13 is not where you want to be. And it's reflected here in these rankings. Scoring only a possible 5.3 out of a possible 15 points for the objective score. But subjectively, the people think you're going to do okay. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You've just got to find it. Carried, in this case, by a very difficult schedule, though not the most difficult schedule, the Solihull Samurots have a chance to improve moving forward. So fingers crossed that you can find a way to do that. Next up in 15th is the Australian Arcanines. The Australian Arcanines have, coached by Jetman99. I do want to try to see if I can name every person who is coaching these teams, just so that I give them a little shout out, you know. Coached by Jetman99, the Australian Arcanines sit at 9.7 total points, but are 15th in objective scoring and 14th in subjective scoring. Really does not help and puts them all the way down in 15th overall. Scoring only a total of 6.75 points out of a possible 15 for the objective scoring. 0-3, not great. Minus 10, slightly better than minus 13. Sure, but not great. Picked up a little bit, earned that extra bit of objective scoring because they have had a harder schedule than the Solihull Samurots. But even then, not the hardest schedule, and it's just not proving to be enough to boost them out of 15th place. Another hard fall, all the way down 5 ranks from last time. Next up, though, might surprise you. I'm going to reveal some of the scores first before I reveal who this coach is, and people can try to see if you can guess who you think this is going to be. 14th place in the rankings at 10.35 total points, sitting in 14th place in objective score at 7 out of 15 points, sitting in 9th place in subjective score at 3.36 points. This team has a mediocre differential, but positive. Positive's good. They've had one of the easiest schedules on the entire league, tied for the second easiest schedule. This is the Uppsala Umbreons, coached by Sven Thun, a team that if the season ended today would be in playoffs, sitting at 14th in our numerical ranking system, because objectively, despite the wins, they haven't really impressed the calculator. You've played teams that have not really earned a lot of wins. In fact, you've mostly been playing against teams that wouldn't make playoffs. The only game you played against a team that is in playoff position right now, you did lose to the Atlanta Victory Stars. Other than that, playing the Vancouver Kyogres and Solihull Samurots, teams with a total of 0 wins between them, really just doesn't show the ranking that you have earned a spot higher than 14th. So despite going 2-1, despite currently sitting in a playoff spot, the Upsala Umbreons drop one spot from the last time they were ranked, from 13th to 14th. And interestingly, their schedule in week 4 gets even easier based on numerical percentages, as they will take on another 0-3 team in the Australian Arcanines, the team currently in 15th place. So, show me that you're going to keep winning, because you're not going to keep playing teams that are 0-3. That's just not going to keep happening. Eventually, you'll play better teams. You keep winning, you'll jump up super fast in these rankings. But right now, you earned 14th spot. Next up in 13th, we're going to go back to the bottom a little bit as the Vancouver Kyogres jump in here, coached by Hag Bones. And this is given, this 10.52 total score gives them a jump of 3 spots from the last time they were ranked in 16th. So usually you don't see a 16 seed lose 3 straight games and jump 3 spots, but that's exactly what we've got here. The Vancouver Kyogres are actually sitting in 11th in objective scoring, but 16th in the subjective scoring. The Aaron and Skyrander clearly don't have faith. Objectively, the points say maybe a little too little faith. But 7.93 points in the objective scoring is good for 11th place. So despite the 13th place finish here, that's sort of, again, the combination of the two factoring in. So being pulled down by that subjective score. There are other teams later on that you'll see they're going to get pulled up by their subjective scoring. Though they are 0-3, the reason that they are so highly ranked above the Upsala Umbreons is because they have tied for the hardest schedule this season. They are one of those teams with an opponent win percentage of 77%. Opponents have won 7 out of 9 total games they've played. So despite that, they don't have the lowest differential. And yeah, they have no wins, but they are still earning a lot of objective points because that difficulty of their schedule shows me that they don't deserve to be 0-3, and maybe in a different schedule would not have been. All right. Next up, in 12th place, is the Green Bay Yompers. Yeah, we are not doing that last 0-3 team quite yet. We're jumping up to a 1-2 team, a team with a positive differential. They are listed here at 10.53. The Vancouver Kyogres are listed at 10.52. It is worth acknowledging that that is actually not as much of a difference as you think. If you keep going in decimal places, the Vancouver Kyogres had a differential, or a total points, of 10.523. And the Green Bay Yompers have a total points of 10.525. So they earned that slight jump of rounding in this case, but it is really, really close between those two teams. This is a team that is 13th in the objective scoring, all the way down at 7.47, a full half point behind the Vancouver Kyogres, but makes it up as an 11th finish in the subjective scoring, giving them just enough to pass the Vancouver Kyogres again on that side. So, just barely squeaking out that win, helping them quite significantly as they picked up a win against a team that has not picked up a win yet. And their strength of schedule not nearly as hard as the Vancouver Kyogres, though not as easy as the Upsala Umbreons. Very much middle of the pack on strength of schedule. Their differential's okay. They have that win. They get 12th place. They get to be above the Vancouver Kyogres. Next up, in 11th place, with a little bit of a jump now, a little bit, 10.77, so, a couple percentage points, not quite as close as the two behind them, is the Austin Weaviles, another team that is 0-3. Austin Weaviles, of course, coached by Nibs. I don't actually know if I said the Green Bay Yompers are coached by Big Time Brownie, but I don't want to re-record. So, Big Time Brownie, I apologize for not saying your name at the time. Nibs, coach of the Austin Weaviles, is here with a 12th place finish in objective points and a 13th place finish in subjective points. Overall 11th, just because of the consistency across the two. Goes 0-3, manages to sit at only 2 ranks lost from last time. It's not bad. Sitting about where you started, good chance to make that up. The reason the Austin Weaviles are higher than some of these other teams is because tied with the Vancouver Coyotes for hardest schedule is the Austin Weaviles, and hardest schedule is worth half of your objective score. And again, their differential isn't as bad as the other teams, so they do score points for that. Those few percentage, just few points of a point. It's literally like 0.4 points for being at minus 10 instead of minus 13. But that gives them just a couple of extra little boost. Those 0.4 points is the difference between 14th and 11th in this particular case. So that differential coming into play, coming in clutch, gets them a few spots in the power rankings for week 3. Next up in 10th is the Chicago Bearticks, coached by Zach. Chicago Bearticks are sitting at 8.86 points. This is the first major jump we're seeing. They're sitting at 8.86 points in objective scoring and 2.89 points in subjective scoring. So they're almost a full point above the Austin Weaviles, sitting at 11.74 points overall. This is an increase of 5 ranks from them from last time to sit in 10th, so a pretty solid metric despite them sitting on the outside of playoffs right now. Despite their differential being -6 overall, the Chicago Bearticks have had the second hardest schedule behind the Vancouver Coyotes and Austin Weaviles, and in fact would be tied with them if they hadn't picked up a victory, so maybe hurting themselves a little bit on that. But that 1 point they lose for their schedule difficulty is made up for by the win. You actually get more points for having a win. Spoilers. So that was sort of intentional. You'd make up the points for lowering your own strength of schedule. With the wins, you get more if you have wins. So the Chicago Bearticks are sitting here. They are sort of in no man's land all by themselves at this rating. They were 9th in objective scoring, which is pretty impressive for them. Definitely the highest we've seen so far. And 15th in subjective scoring. So for whatever reason, the other coaches don't see it, but the numbers don't lie. Chicago Bearticks are definitely a team to watch out for as the season progresses. And if a team is going to crack, let's say the Uppsala Umbreons, the Chicago Bearticks might jump on that opportunity. Next up in 9th place with another full point jump, we have at 12.73 points, the Malum Arsenal, another 1 and 2 team here, sitting in 9th overall in the standings. Raised 3 from the last time. Malum Arsenal coached by Devious Ditto. Sitting at 9.51 objective points and 3.22 subjective points. A pretty significant jump on both categories over the Chicago Bearticks. 5th place, though. 5th place in the objective ranking. If this was only an objective score, the Malum Arsenal would be seeded 5th. However, subjectively, not as good. 10th overall in subjective scoring. And the Uppsala Umbreons are 9th in subjective. The Malum Arsenal are 10th. This is holding them back. But if they continue to perform in the actual objective scoring elements, they will see their ranking increase pretty quickly. Again, this is a team on the outside looking in for playoffs, but maybe chomping at the bit at the possibility that there's a crack in some of these teams above them when they start to play some of the more difficult teams in this season, ones that the Malum Arsenal have already faced, having a fairly difficult schedule themselves, tied with the Chicago Bearticks for second most difficult. All right, so we're going to get into the top half of the rankings here, and once again, we're going to play a little bit of a guessing game. Who do you think this next team is? This team is sitting in 10th in objective rank at 8.25 total objective points out of 15. They are sitting in 1st overall in subjective rank at 4.67 subjective out of 5 possible points. So a total of 12.92. If you guessed a team with a loss at all, you're wrong. This is the Tasmanian Toxicroats, coached by Max Rapture, a team that is 3-0 right now. Why are they sitting in 8th in our power rankings? They're at 12.92. That is slightly above the Malum Arsenal, being basically carried by their subjective ranking. Their strength of schedule is the single lowest of anybody in the entire season. Their opponents have a total of 1 win between them over the first 3 weeks. When your opponents are 1-8 and half of your objective score is your strength of schedule, it's really not that impressive to the objective scoring to go 3-0. Going 3-0 at all is impressive, mind you. But it is not going to score you a ton of points when your score happens to be based on your strength of schedule. 3-0 plus 7 is a great score, great line, and worth top 8. That's a playoff spot. But is it worth going above that? Will you beat any of the teams that are 2-1 or 3-0, none of whom you've faced yet? We have to see. And if we do, you'll again rise up so quickly through these rankings. But as a snapshot of post week 3, it's sort of a we have to see. This is another quirk of this, though. Having placed 7th in the post draft rankings, going 3-0, dropping 1 spot. There's a team that went 0-3 and rose 3 spots. So welcome to the power rankings when you use numbers and math. It is weird. It is not just like, oh, the 3-0 teams are all the top 4, and then the 2-1 teams and the 1-2 teams. Oh no, we've got 3-0 teams all the way down here in 8th, just 0.2 points above a 1-2 team, and it's basically being carried by their subjective rank, which is the top subjective rank of anybody in the entire league. Coaches like them, but the stats don't lie. Next up, we have what I will call like a group here. We're going to do it in order, obviously, but I'm going to call this like a little bit of a grouping because these next 4 teams could have basically gone in any order, and the numbers are so close that it's really hard to like actually get a lot of understanding from them. But 7th place, based on the numbers, is the Atlanta Victory Stars. Losing 2 spots from the last time hurts when you go 2-1. They're sitting at a 9.36 in their objective scoring and a 3.9 in their subjective scoring. Good for 6th and 7th, respectively. They are coached by Playmaker. I don't know if I said that. I think I said the Tasmanian Toxicroaks are coached by Max Rapture. If I didn't, now you got it. And the Atlanta Victory Stars have 13.26 total points. That is a good season overall. That is a respectable score. That 7th place in the subjective ranking is holding them to 7th place overall. But I think that, again, this is a playoff spot, and if you're a team sitting at 2-1, basically 7th in the overall rankings, you got to look at this and say, like, yeah, that's accurate. Their only loss coming to a team that's ranked above them, and they've beaten a couple of teams as well that are also 2-1. Their strength of schedule is not super low, and there's a lot of good to say about them. But we're going to move on because I kind of want to talk about these next 4 as a group. So the next team in 6th is the Rome Empoleon, sitting at 13.36 points, so 0.1 points above the Atlanta Victory Stars. Keep that in mind. This is the only team in the entire league that did not move between the 2 rating systems 3 weeks apart. They were 6th post-draft. They are 6th right now, so did not change in where they are sitting. The Rome Empoleons have a 9.62 in objective scoring and a 3.74. We have not seen a score like that in objective yet. That is good for 4th overall in the objective scoring and is a full 0.1 points above the 5th place team in the Malum Arsenal. So that's no joke. Subjectively 8th, being held back, being put into 6th. But again, 4th and 8th, remember that the Atlanta Victory Stars were 6th and 7th. And now we're going to move on. Again, I'm just going to talk about these kind of as a unit. 5th place is the Charlotte Corviknights, coached by Bloody, at 13.46, so only another 0.1 point above the Rome Empoleons, 0.2 points above the Atlanta Victory Stars. They've lost 4 spots. They were our number 1 before. They are now the number 5 team. But one quirk I really wanted to talk about and wanted to get this revealed before I did was that the Charlotte Corviknights and the Atlanta Victory Stars objective stat line. Let's go through it because I think it's interesting. The Charlotte Corviknights are 2-1 plus 3. The Atlanta Victory Stars are 2-1 plus 3. Both of them have an opponent win percentage of 44.44%. As a result, they are exactly tied in every objective category. They have a total of 9.36 points, tied for 6th. But the Charlotte Corviknights were our number 1 last time. The Atlanta Victory Stars were I think, number 5 in the last ranking. And this time, the Atlanta Victory Stars were actually given the edge by Aaron slightly. Aaron gave the Charlotte Corviknights a 7.15 and the Atlanta Victory Stars a 7.3. It just barely doesn't make up for the difference from the original ranking from Skyrander. And as a result, the Charlotte Corviknights are 0.2 points ahead overall of the Atlanta Victory Stars in subjective rank, and somehow the Roman Polion squeaked in between them. I don't even understand how that's possible. I mean, that's just ridiculous that he managed to, with rankings that are completely arbitrary compared to those two, get in between them. But there you have it. So again, these 3 could probably go in any order, and it's super arbitrary which one's where. But I do want to add in one more team to continue to convolute the whole thing, and that's our number 4 team, which is the Orlando Magikarps, a team that is 3-0. Their score of 13.59 is only 0.13 above the Charlotte Corviknights. Barely a quarter of a point, a little like a third of a point, over the Atlanta Victory Stars in 7th. They have actually a lower objective score than all 3 of the prior teams at 9.32, which is good for 8th place. There is no 7th because there's 2 teams tied for 6th. But their subjective score, they're 3-0, 3rd overall at 4.27 subjective score. So in a wild placement piece, the Atlanta Victory Stars kind of lose out on what could have been 4th place without much change. Just a tiny change to their subjective score could have risen them all the way to 4th. All 3 of these teams are within 0.33 points of each other. And I just think that's really interesting because these teams are variant across the board. The Orlando Magikarps are 3-0 plus 7. The Roman Polions are 1-2 plus 1. And yet they are so close in the ranking. The Orlando Magikarps being carried to 4th on the back of a very strong subjective scoring. The Atlanta Victory Stars and the Roman Polions getting pushed down to the bottom of this by a harsher subjective scoring. But I just think that's absolutely wild. So the Orlando Magikarps, of course, are in 4th now. That is actually a change of -1 from the last time that we had these rankings. They were 3rd. They are now 4th. Those little changes of like 1 rank really just don't tell us much in terms of that you are worse or better. But it is always just amusing to see a team that is 3-0 drop in the rankings at all. And to continue the chain of 3-0 teams dropping in the rankings by 1 spot, in 3rd place, finally our little jump here all the way up to 14.35 points, is the Seattle Dragonaires, coached by Absolute. I do apologize. I think I missed saying that the Orlando Magikarps are coached by The Choice Specs. My bad. I'm working on it. There's a lot of talking to do. The Seattle Dragonaires, coached by Absolute, in 3rd place at 14.35 points. Were 2nd before, have dropped 1 spot down to 3rd. They're objectively 3rd place. That is exactly where they should be placed. Subjectively, 4th place. Getting eked out by those Orlando Magikarp, the Tasmanian Toxicroaks, and one of the top 2 teams as well. Sitting at 4.18, though, they are the first team in objective scoring to reach 10 objective points at 10.17, which is a far cry from 4th place at 9.62, which we mentioned was the Roman Polions. So a pretty sizable jump there. We're actually going to see a significant jump from there in objective scoring. But Seattle Dragonaires have done basically everything they've needed to do. They've had a schedule that was not a joke. Their differential is fine. They've won all their games, and they've managed to put themselves in a position where this objective and subjective scoring is fairly much equalized in terms of, yep, you should be about 3rd place. So that's where they sit. Sitting on the podium, a comfortable spot in the playoffs if the season was to end today. It's a good spot. Next up, in 2nd place, nearly a full point above 3rd place, is the New Jersey Brobats, coached by Root, a team that is currently 2-1, jumping 9 spots, our highest jump of any team by a sizable margin. Previously was 11th, but has jumped all the way to 2nd place on the back of 11.19 objective points, 2nd overall there, and carrying them over a 6th finish in subjective points at 4.06. The New Jersey Brobats have gone 2-1 despite having the 3rd hardest schedule of anybody in this season. They have an incredible differential of plus 10, which is tied for the highest this season despite being 2-1. And their record gives them some points as well. Objectively, honestly, held back by the original 11th place rank and score that Skyrander gave. Aaron gives a very good score to this team. Actually, the third highest score Aaron gave was to the New Jersey Brobats. And that's going to carry them all the way up to 6th in subjective rank, despite being 11th in the original. And first place overall, call as much foul play as you want. I had nothing to do except for choosing which numbers and which percentages to go with. The New York Empoleon, coached by me, GoldoaDragon, sitting in first place, another point above the New Jersey Brobats at 16.27, a rise of 3 places from my previous ranking at 4th. Objective points overall was first at 11.79. Subjective points overall second at 4.48, behind only the Tasmanian Toxicroaks. I do have a high differential. I have won all my games. And my strength of schedule, as far as the 3-0 teams go, is the highest of all the 3-0 teams. The Tasmanian Toxicroaks have the lowest strength of schedule. The Orlando Magikarps have the second lowest strength of schedule, and the Seattle Dragonairs have the third lowest strength of schedule. Or there's a bunch of ties in there. My strength of schedule, a little bit higher than that. So that is where I'm getting that extra little oomph to put myself over the New Jersey Brobats. But there you have it, the Week 3 power rankings in full. And a reminder, if you want to gauge how likely you are to win, all you got to do is take your score, add your opponent's score, and then take your score divided by the total sum that you created. So, one quick reminder of that. If I was to see how likely I would be to beat the Tasmanian Toxicroaks in Week 4, based on this rating alone, I'm going to take my own score of 16.27 and divide it by the total, which is just over 29, and that percentage that comes out of that is how likely the New York Empoleon are to win that fight. If you take 12.92 and divide it by that total, that's how likely the Tasmanian Toxicroaks are, or 1 minus the other one. They're always going to be the same. That said, a lot of these you're seeing teams that have already lost to other coaches above them in the rankings. That's because those are probably very close, and 50-50s can go either way. Anyway, that's enough talking from me. I'm sure you've had it with the math and the numbers and the chaos that I have created by wanting to do something really, really ridiculous. If you want to see more of this and you are super invested in finding out how these numbers shake out as the season continues, tell me, and I will consider doing this after Week 6. And then I'm told that Skyrander and Zilix are going to take over for pre-playoff or post-season rankings, so I can do one more in Week 6 if people are looking for it. Anyway, that's all I've got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was a little bit enlightening as to how you can create a numerical quantitative score out of things that seem very qualitative. And I will see you guys later. Take care, everybody.